Bragod, our aim is to recombine Welsh high art poetry, or cerdd, as it's known in Welsh, or cynghanedd, as it's also known, or bardic poetry, as it's also known, to recombine that high art poetry.
The art of the tongue?
The art of the tongue, which is what it means literally, with cerdd. Now, cerdd, I'm not going to say cerdd again because it's got a modern meaning, which has got nothing to do with the medieval meaning. So we're going to recombine high art Welsh bardic poetry with high art Welsh bardic string music. With the poetry, we've got university departments and marvelous scholars, and we've got 200 years plus of scholarship of Welsh high art poetry from the Middle Ages, the product of the bards. There is a source of music, which is the Robert ap Hugh manuscript. So this is a facsimile, llawysgrif Robert ap Hugh, and here it says, dyma'r pedwar mesur ar hugain cerdd. And you can see there's a list, and it's done out in binary code. So here is the binary code, and there are the names of each measure. So there are 24 measures, just as there are 24 measures of cerdd, which is to say the bardic poetry. So the the bardic personnel who played the crwth and who played the harp, they used these 24 measures, but their real most important job was to accompany bardic poetry as it was sung, and it was sung by a special branch of the personnel who were the datgeiniaid, which is what Mary Ann's role is in all this. So the datgeiniaid sang the bardic poetry.
The bards themselves didn't present their own work.
No, it's a very important part. In very early times, let's say times of Aneurin and the early Taliesin material, it may well have been the poet who sang and accompanied his own poetry on a lyre. So it'll have been something very like this, that Aneurin played and Taliesin played, and everybody played until about the 8th and 9th century, when the triangular harp had definitely come to Wales. So here is the crwth, and if we compare them, the crwth this instrument developed a fingerboard around the 8th or 9th century. And then, when the musical bow came to Western Europe, which wasn't till the late 10th, the early 11th century, then the crwth was a complete thing. And the interesting thing about the crwth is that it seems to have fossilized pretty soon after that.
If in the time of Taliesin, he may well have performed his own work with the lyre, how did that then develop, as you were saying, into the high art and barddoniaeth?
Okay, so what happened is that they formed a craft guild, like goldsmiths or silversmiths or carpenters. But the general rule for the whole craft for the members of these crafts was that they had to stick to their role. And at the very end, at the end of the 16th century, when the people who traditionally paid for all this work stopped paying for various reasons, then there are poems by proper trained bards which satirize poets who are having to sing and even play their own accompaniments for their own poems. And it's shameful. It's been shameful for some hundreds of years, but really they're satires because they know it's necessary now, because you probably can't go to the local harpist and get him to do it, so you've got to do it yourself. But that's how things implode at the end of the period, when it all dies out, and something very similar happened in Ireland. Right, so there was this very high art in the music, in the poetry, and in the whole business of performing it for rich and powerful people. And the rich and powerful people, during the 16th century, and largely because of the Acts of Union, Henry VIII's Acts of Union in the 1540s, he put Wales on the same legal basis as England, the same civil rights, if you like, as England, the same laws. And so the laws of Hywel Dda, which were still in use, for some of the laws going back to the 9th century. So in parts of Wales, Hywel Dda's laws were still in use, but Welsh law, it was really largely about tribal law. So about the teulu, which was very like the clans in Ireland or Scotland. And it was about a communal responsibility for crimes. So the teulu, his whole tribal group, had to pay compensation. There were fixed amounts. So this kind of difference in legality and in these tribal ties, it meant that praise poetry, which is what all this instrumental music was for, this instrumental music and the singing and the poetry, it was in order to praise these top people. They could write, and they did write things down, which is very good for us, but most of it was held in their heads. By the end of the 16th century, it was going and gone, so that the Robert ap Hugh manuscript, that was written down 1613 or thereabouts, and it was already a thing of the past.
So after the Act of Union, the children of the rich and powerful Welsh chiefs were sent to school, to university, with their English counterparts, because their families wanted them to know the English ways. And so they also fell in with the English, what was happening in English culture at that time.
Robert ap Hugh's manuscript is a tablature for the harp. So tablatures were common in the 15th and 16th and 17th century. Well, it was rediscovered in the 18th century, and it fell into the hands of Morisiaid Morn, the Morrises of Anglesey, and they were part of the people who brought about what's now called the Welsh Renaissance in the 18th century. The lyre, this lyre has 6 strings, which was pretty common, pretty standard in the Dark Ages. So that here we have G, D, C. Those are the ones. Those are the ones. And then these are the O's. It's 2 sets of contrasting notes.
So the ones have to remain the same, but the O's could be sharpened or flattened.
This Bragod we play and sing in Pythagorean tuning. So I hope this is still in tune. We haven't got a nice example of a lyre from Wales. So this lyre and my other 2 lyres, which are in different keys, if you like, they're in different sizes. They are based on a lyre from the 7th century, which was found under the floor in Cologne, under St. Severin's Church, under the floor. And that can be dated because of the floor. So that's what my lyres are copied from. And this crwth is based on the Hayward crwth, which is a crwth from about 1700, maybe a little before, which is now at the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth. And then when I discovered that there was a whole manuscript of Welsh bardic music, I was very intrigued, and it took me years to get anywhere with it and turn it into playable music, because I couldn't imagine how different it was going to be, how unlike modern Welsh folk music. And I often hear the idea expressed that modern Welsh folk music has come from Welsh bardic music, as found in Robert ap Hugh. And I can only say that nothing could be further than the truth. If you listen to Welsh folk music, Welsh folk tunes, and the instruments they're played on, they're tuned a modern way, they're played a modern way, and it's just so obvious that they are a dialect of what goes on in England, in Ireland, in Scotland, in France and Germany. It's got the same harmonies. It's the music that replaced bardic music in Wales. Whereas when you really look at Robert ap Hugh, no amount of fiddling with it is going to turn it into any of those genre or kinds of music. This, as Marianne said, this is non-developmental music. As soon as you have 3 or more chords in a piece, or 3 or more chords implied in the melody, in a single melody, then you're going on a journey which is led by the harmony. So the harmony leads the listener, whereas in Robert ap Hugh, as in Indian music, it's non-developmental. It's the art of variation. And what underlies the variations is the patterns of ones and O's.
This is 5 Englynion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 englynion that have been chosen. One, because there's a piece in the Robert Apu manuscript called Cainc Griffith Abadda. And the name of the poet in the first englynion is Griffith Abadda ap Dafydd. So this is the most likely pairing of poetry and music that we would find something from the Robert Apu manuscript with a name attached to it. We don't know if this is actually a pairing, but this is all the evidence that we have that we've put together. So this first englyn is a boastful englyn by a poet who is at the top of his tree and who feels very pleased with himself. I mean, there are actually sexual connotations in it. And the subsequent englynion are ones from later poets who are already seeing their tradition, their custom, their way of earning a living being pulled apart by modern instruments like fiddles and English ways, things that have been brought over and that are taking away from their culture and their tradition. They're very compressed in the way that things are expressed, very intense and very powerful. And it was thought by some that they could even be used as curses, as blessings or curses. They were that powerful. So this measure is 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So that's what I'll be doing. 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
So this is, it's usually known as Awdl 51 from the Book of Aneirin. But modern scholars are coming round to the idea that this stanza, this verse, this awdl, used to be the first verse of the Gododdin. And this long poem by Aneirin commemorates 300 warriors who were killed at Catterick in the last third of the 6th century. And this particular warrior was called Grugin. It was a tribal battle, and it was between the Gododdin, and the Gododdin was the name of a tribe, and it was the name of their kingdom as well. And it was a territorial war because mixed groups of, they think it's probably Angles and Picts got together. They were attacking the Welsh. These people were the proto-Welsh speakers. Their actual kingdom went between it contained part of Scotland and part of the north of England.
So this is 11001011. So we've borrowed from the manuscript.
It's Corfiniwr.
From
Go to 107.
From the measure called Corfiniwr. Can you see it there? Second one, 001011.
We're borrowing from the late Middle Ages to set something.
We've taken this thing on. We have to own what we do. Otherwise, why are we doing it? So we find out everything that we can. Well, when I say we, I mean Bob. Bob's been finding out the everything. This has been his bandwagon, one-man bandwagon, and I've jumped on it. And imagine for me, as somebody from Trinidad, who thought history started in 1492 with Christopher Columbus. What a short history we have. you know, where a lot of what has been indigenous has been greatly Hispanicized and just lost to us. Imagine me being able to sing something from the 6th century with the correct instrument in the way that the language would have been spoken at that time. Because we're not just working between ourselves here and with our colleague William Taylor, we're also working with poets who are able, and academics of this, who are able to advise us and give us access to their study.